There are people who claim that dogs can sense when a volcano is about to erupt, but how do they know it? And is this true for other animals too? It turns out science has an answer to these questions. So in this episode of SCI Show and MinuteEarth, we'll take a look at whether it's actually true that animals can predict volcanic eruptions and how they might be able to do so. First, let's talk about what exactly happens before a volcanic eruption, because that will help us figure out how animals might be able to tell one is coming. Most volcanoes don't give much warning before they blow. Scientists generally categorize volcanoes into three categories based on how predictable they are. The first is a volcano that's quiet and won't erupt for thousands of years, like most of the 1,500 or so dormant volcanoes in the US. Then there are volcanoes that erupt often and give plenty of signs beforehand, like Mount Vesuvius in Italy, which erupted in 79 AD and destroyed the Roman city of Pompeii. And finally, there are volcanoes that seem to erupt at random, which are also the ones that pose the greatest danger to humans. To understand why some volcanoes are more unpredictable than others, it helps to know how magma chambers work. Magma chambers are vast pools of molten rock found beneath the Earth's surface, and they're constantly circulating with new material coming from deep within the planet and old stuff going back down into the mantle. You see, volcanoes form when the hot rock from the mantle makes its way up through the crust, but the magma doesn't always make it all the way to the surface. Instead, magma chambers form when magma gets stuck between cooler rocks and hardens. Once a magma chamber starts filling up, pressure builds until it's great enough to blast through the rocks above it, and once it does, the magma becomes lava, and ash and gas are released. In volcanoes that erupt often, scientists can monitor the rate at which the magma chamber is filling up. They can also watch for earthquakes and changes in the shape of the volcano, all of which signal that an eruption is coming. For volcanoes that erupt randomly, though, scientists have a harder time knowing when to sound the alarm. That's because the process of magma mixing in their magma chambers is chaotic. There isn't a steady supply of fresh magma or a consistent increase in pressure. And sometimes the magma chamber empties completely, meaning scientists lose their only long-term monitoring tool. Now, I know what you're thinking. If we can't predict when a volcano that's been quiet for a while is going to blow, how are animals supposed to? Well, it turns out that some species living near those unpredictable volcanoes do know something we don't. Take, for example, the Lake Kivu, a lake in the Democratic Republic of the Congo that sits at the edge of a dangerous volcano called Nyiragongo. In the 2000s, scientists discovered that the lake was home to over 30 million fish, mostly cichlids, and they noticed that whenever the volcano rumbled, the fish would swim to the surface, gasping for air. As it turned out, the fish were reacting to gases produced by the volcano. Every time the volcano rumbled, nitrogen and carbon dioxide would bubble out of the lake's depths and make their way into the water column, creating a sudden, deadly deoxygenated dead zone. After a major eruption in 2010, scientists returned to the lake to find the fish population had plummeted by 99%. The survivors had migrated to deeper, less affected waters, and when researchers monitored the fish behavior after that, they noticed another pattern. Right before each small earthquake caused by the volcano, the fish would again swim to the surface, gasping for air. But this time, there weren't any harmful gases present. Instead, the fish were responding to the sounds made by the rumbling volcano. This could mean that the fish were trying to tell us when the volcano was about to erupt. But unfortunately, this discovery came with a major caveat. It turned out the fish were only reacting to low-frequency sounds below 20 Hz, which are difficult to detect with human ears. So even though this discovery was a huge step forward for understanding how animals might warn us about volcanoes, humans couldn't use it to predict eruptions until scientists figured out a way to listen to those low-frequency rumblings. But the good news is that scientists did figure out a way to listen to those low-frequency sounds. By 2015, researchers had developed underwater recorders that could pick up those rumblings. When they put them in Lake Kivu, They confirmed that yes, the volcano does emit a swarm of low-frequency sounds just before an eruption, and yes, the fish are responding to those sounds, not just gases. Since then, the local government has used these recorders to try to predict the volcano's behavior, though with limited success so far. So while this discovery gave us a better idea of how volcanoes rumble before they erupt, the next question was, which other animals could sense these rumblings or chemical changes? One good candidate was the Javan rhinoceros. These rhinos live on the Indonesian island of Java, which is also home to Mount Semeru, one of Indonesia's most active volcanoes. Like many volcanoes, Mount Semeru gives off steam, sulfur dioxide, and other gases as the magma chamber below it slowly fills up. And starting in 2018, scientists began tracking the movements of 15 of these rhinos using GPS. What they found was that the rhinos changed their behavior depending on the type of volcanic activity. When the volcano emitted more sulfur dioxide, the rhinos spent less time eating and more time walking around. And when there were more earthquakes, they moved to higher ground. Scientists think the rhinos were picking up on the subtle signs of impending eruptions and making themselves scarce. Because Mount Semeru gives off a steady stream of gases and regularly rumbles, the rhinos may have evolved to respond to these signals. In fact, scientists think the rhinos likely aren't the only species that have adapted to live near a volcano. They believe that species living near volcanoes across the world might have evolved to be sensitive to volcanic activity. But there are also animals that seem to have picked up on these signals without evolving to do so. For example, Japanese macaques, aka snow monkeys, live on the islands of Honshu and Shikoku, both of which have active volcanoes. And since the early 1990s, scientists have recorded the monkeys' behaviors during different volcanic events. They found that when the monkeys detected an eruption or earthquakes, they huddled together and screamed. They also stopped foraging and instead spent their days grooming each other and staring at the volcano. Likewise, in 2004, when the Chichen volcano in Chile awoke after 500 years of quiet, local goats fled the area, refusing to return even after the eruption ended. And in 2011, when the Ubinoni volcano in Japan erupted, locals reported that the pigs disappeared from nearby Lake Tozawa. Of course, we can't ask animals why they flee before a volcanic eruption, but their behavior tells us that they're detecting some kind of signal. Exactly what that signal is depends on the species and the volcano. Some animals, like the fish in Lake Kivu, may be responding to the volcano's sounds. Others may be smelling the gases it releases. Still others may be sensing the small tremors that precede eruptions. And some may have inherited their sensitivity to volcanic activity, having evolved in areas with volcanoes and passed down adaptations that help them survive. What's clear is that animal senses are more acute than ours in lots of ways. Their hearing, smell, sight and touch can pick up on things we can't, and they may be able to use these abilities to warn us about dangerous natural disasters. All we have to do is keep listening, watching, and learning. Thank you for watching this episode of SCI Show and MinuteEarth. If you'd like to help support this channel, you can join our community on a crowdfunding platform.